Hey everyone. You might be wondering, what in Schwarzschild's name is going on the screen? And do you need a degree in astrophysics to replicate it? Don't worry, I got you covered. In this video, I will be going over my Black Hole Ignite Sorcerer. This is a fire damage over time build, centered around the synergy between Heatwave node in the Black Hole and the Wildfire Embers amulet. Last Epoch Tools has a few builds utilizing this glorious amulet, but surprisingly, none of them are Sorcerer nor even Mage based. Which is weird, because Sorcerer historically offered a very good support for Ignite. Wildfire Embers spreads your ignites on each enemy twice per second while in combat, and gives you a chance to spawn a Wildfire Wisp next to an ignited enemy. The Wisps spawn approximately once per 2 seconds or twice per 3 seconds depending on the role, and each Wisp stays for approximately 7 seconds. What's not obvious from the description is that spawn chance is not rolled per enemy, meaning you can have maximum 4 to 5 Wisps at a time, regardless of whether you are attacking a group of enemies or a single target. What do these Wisps do and why are they important? That's the best part. When you directly use a fire skill, each Wildfire Wisp has a chance to repeat it. The chances follow a binomial distribution. For example, with 4 Wisps, you have approximately 60% chance to not duplicate the spell at all, 33% chance to duplicate it exactly once, 6% chance to triplicate it, and so on. The good news is that the expected value of binomial distribution is calculated simply as probability multiplied by the number of trials. So, 12% multiplied by 4 in our example, which gives us a 48% damage multiplier with 4 Wisps or 60% with 5 Wisps, which is obviously a huge deal, and is the answer to the question of how you can spam 15 black holes at the same time. The weirdest part is that unlike literally any other source of indirect casts, spells repeated by Wildfire don't consume mana. Not sure if it's a bug or intended. So, anyways, let's jump to skills. Let's start with a black hole. One of the basics of Last Epoch is that ailments have their own scaling and usually don't scale with anything else besides their specific element. Damage, such as physical for bleeds, dot damage, certain ailment duration stats, penetration, and so on. But there's an exception from that rule, is that ailment damage scales with more damage nodes on the skill that applied them. Historically, Black Hole has been a skill with one of the highest number of damage multiplier nodes in its tree, which was balanced by the relatively weak base damage of the skill itself. But there's a node called Heatwave, which lets Black Hole apply ignite stacks proportionally to your uncapped fire resistance. For example, I have 400 uncapped fire res, which translates to 40 stacks of ignite per second. Now if we take some damage multiplier node, such as binary system, the ignite damage that we apply with Heatwave would be doubled. If we take a singularity node, it would be quadrupled, and so on. You get the idea? Now the goal is simply to grab all the more damage nodes we can get, and for that we need as many plus skill levels as we can get. There are a few caveats to that though. Not all the nodes are good to us. Some are bugged, some just don't work with ailments by design for some reason. For example, Weekend Reality would look like an awesome choice, but the description literally states it doesn't apply to ailments, so if you're planning to grab Singularity, those 2 points are wasted to you. On the other hand, Scattered would be a good logical alternative to Singularity, and, if you're wondering, yes, these two are exclusive. So you would either have twice the number of ignites from 2 black holes, or 1 black hole, but twice as powerful ignites. But unfortunately, Scattered is bugged, and the second hole doesn't stack extra ignites on the same target. But I would say even with that, the choice between 2 nodes is a tough one. Yes, Singularity does way more single target damage, but Scattered, just look at this shit, it's glorious, and it also helps a lot on spread out or moving targets. But Scattered or not, Black Hole still has a very small area of effect, so you need some supplementary skill for clear. Technically any fire skill would do, but there aren't many to begin with. Our choice is Volcanic Orb. Volcanic Orb is great for ailments mainly for the same reason as Black Hole. It has a lot of more damage nodes. We are specifically interested in nodes that give more damage to the core. Not because we do damage with the core itself, but because we pick explosive ground which scales with it. The choices are fairly straightforward here. Just pick whatever is tagged as core, and ignore one node that gives more damage to core hits. Hits are not ailments, so that node doesn't do anything for ignites. And for the spare points, pick mana efficiency. Meteor is another important part of the build because we are a fire build, and all fire builds are obligated to take Meteor for global fire penetration buff. There's not much else to it. Meteor is not a particularly good skill for ailment stacking, but you can circumvent that a little bit by going into Shrapnel, which has X4 damage multiplier. With that, your Meteor can do some noticeable ignite damage, and its own base damage is more than enough to clear trash mobs. For transportation, we take Focus. You don't really have any significant mana issues with this build, but on occasion, you will be actually channeling it for mana regen, instead of just for teleporting. For that reason, we don't take Teleport. Fire Shield, we taking basic setup. The only minor difference is that we take mana regen nodes. We are not extremely tanky, but we have a very good cooldown reduction with our gear, so why not utilize it for mana regen as well? Passives are fairly straightforward. In the base mage tree, just take the usual ward retention nodes. I personally utilize the low life build, so I also took Reactive Barrier, which triggers automatically this way. In Sword tree, just take fire related passives. Particularly you need 5 points in Inferno for 50% more fire dot damage and Chronomancy for ignite duration. The rest is just standard sword stuff for mana and cooldown reduction. In Runemaster 3 you want Sphere of Protection for HP and for reduced damage taken. As for the gear, we already discussed Wildfire Embers in the beginning. You want to prefer elemental damage over time and fire resistance for damage. Chance to ignite doesn't affect Black Hole, but does affect your other fire skills, so it's still useful as a tertiary damage stat. We obviously need cooldown reduction as well, so boots and belt slots are reserved for that. And for defense, you just go the usual mage stuff with ward stacking and ward retention. I will not be going into too much detail about every item, so I'll just comment on a few potentially tricky choices. For example, it could be argued that you could use the new set rings for Volcanic Orb. On paper, the spinning orb is really good. I presume the direct damage version benefits much more from it, because naturally, if the orb orbits around you, it can pierce the same enemy multiple times. But even the ailment version like ours gets boosted by a factor of 2. In practice, however, it feels kinda clunky to play. I don't know how to explain it, but still, this is a viable alternative to Ashes of Mortality. Ashes is a safe choice though, as it grants you approximately a 1000 ward per second with its proc. Additionally, I use Crest of Unity over Bone Clamor. Objectively, Bone Clamor is a better helmet for this build, as it comes with built-in resists and int, but I managed to steal a 3 LP crest for 400k on the market, and got lucky with a decent slam on it. Realistically, the only useful thing it brings to the build is reduced damage against Ignited, which I hope stacks additively with Sphere of Protection from the Runemaster tree. I do stack some mana and mana regen because as much as anyone else, I hate Focus, and with this setup, you don't really have to use it for mana regen. And last but not the least, I'd like to mention corrupted items. Previously, you would spend your last dime on the highest LP piece you could afford, then try to slam something decent onto it, then fail miserably and give up. Corruption changed things drastically. Now, you would rather go 1 or even 2 LP lower than you can afford, then get as many of these items as you can, then slam, and then try to corrupt them in hopes of getting some uber affix. A good example here is the Spine of Malatros. You only care about plus levels on this sword, and two-handed swords don't really have any exceptionally useful affixes for casters. Besides, maybe fire penetration, or mana, as I mentioned above. But what they do have is this corrupted affix. 80% increased area and damage over time. which is insane for Black Hole. The only issue is to get it randomly. For me, it took 20 attempts to even get tier 4. And in the process, I might or might not have bought all the cheap swords from the bazaar. So for this reason, I would argue you're better off with the Circle of Fortune. An interesting side effect of item corruption is that you kinda have to live with your random affixes and plan your build around it. For example, I didn't even plan to play a low life build. But then my unstable core rolled tier 7 life to ward, and I thought, why not? In the closing, I would say the following. This might not be the most powerful sorcerer build, but it sure as hell is fun and flashy. You can easily farm all the normal content, including normal Aberroth, Harbingers, tier 3 Echoes, and the new pinnacle boss, Vision of the Observer. I genuinely doubt that in the current configuration you could kill Uber Aberroth with it. But then again, very few builds can. I personally pushed it to approximately 600 corruption, but a more optimized version could likely go to a 1000 without too much of a hassle. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.